Hello, everybody. I'm 7 minutes late. I apologize. So, quick update, and then I'm going to introduce our guest. Let's see here. First of all, I'm going to make sure he has a link to be a guest. There. All right. All right, we got Ed, who I would like to get on at some point. So I have a quick question for anyone who's watching. I'm running my air filter here because my allergies have been driving me crazy. Can you guys hear that, or is my mic negating it? Like, do you hear like a fan sound or anything? How you doing, man? I think I'm about halfway through your podcast on making comics. I got to go back and finish it, but I'm enjoying it. Okay, cool. Okay, then I can leave my filter on. So where are we at? Last night, I am, as has been the case for like what feels like months now, I am just like a solid day behind. And I'm at the stage where I don't know where I'll catch up unless I take like a personal day and just sit at home rather than go to work and get caught up, which I'm not excited to do. Like that to me is like, that's the break glass in case of emergency move, is like burning PTO to like try to get caught up or ahead on the comic. It's definitely an option, and it's something I've thought about, but I think I want to save that for some section of the book where that kind of move really pays off, where I could get like maybe 1 or even 2 pages ahead, not just a day ahead, like pages ahead. Like that's where I want to save that option for. So anyway, finished page. Let me see where I'm at. I'm in such the zone here. I don't even remember what page I just finished. Let's see here. I just finished page 38. Starting page 39 today. Closing, like 40 will be a nice, let's see here. 40 will be a nice milestone. There's nothing especially, well, actually, no, there is a cool moment on page 40. I was going to say there's nothing interesting about page 40, like in terms of the whole story. 40 actually is a key moment, but it's just a psychological, like page 40. That feels like, it's nice to get to those big tens. This page that I'm about to start, page 39, I'm always reluctant to say this because you never know until you start, until you're like in it. It's complicated, but it doesn't look too bad. So there is a chance if I was doing a podcast next Saturday morning, there's a chance I would be starting page 40, which would be great. That would be right back on schedule. I don't know if that's going to happen because, first of all, you know, I still might be stubbornly a day behind, like I said. And second, just a heads up, there will not be a stream Saturday morning or probably Sunday morning this coming weekend because people are coming into town. What people? People, watchers of my stream might know. Corey Kerr, Jim Lujan. We're going to caravan out to Scott Circlin's house. So because I want to allow time for all that, I will be trying to like focus on drawing wherever I can. And I can't, like, I know I'm just not going to really have time to stream. There may be a stream Saturday night, but it won't be this thing. It will be maybe a very special edition of Top 5 with the crew or something. I don't know. We haven't worked any details out yet, but that's a possibility. Mr. Lujan. Yeah, that's true. You can't, I mean, fortunately or unfortunately. So at my work, it's probably the same as with you. You can accrue it up to a certain level. And then after that, it's use it or lose. It's not use. You don't lose it. What happens if you don't use it at the end of the year? They cut you a check for whatever's over that limit. I am nowhere near that limit. I have a deep distrust of people who don't use their PTO. Now, look, some jobs, it's not that easy. I get it. Some jobs, they give you PTO and they'll never approve over like you actually using it. And you have a job where it's very difficult to take off or whatever. There's definitely parts of my job that's very difficult to take time off. But to me, that is part of my compensation. Saving it, sitting on top of my PTO like a dragon on top of a pile of gold is fucking ridiculous. Like what I tend to do, this is very interesting for everyone, I'm sure, especially for people who don't have the luxury of having PTO. I try to save it up to a point, which is sort of like my emergency PTO. I get in a car accident. Someone dies and it's like I got to take a week off. Whatever the thing is, like I try to save like an emergency bank of PTO that I never want to dip into. Like this is the minimum amount I want to maintain. But over that amount, I'll take a day whenever I can get away with it. This is, I do not believe, like I know people at my work who are like, every year they got to cut me a check because I'm maxed out. I never take time off. That's a weird flex. What, you love being here that much? What are you doing? Use it. Anyway, let's say here, 50 is the new 40. Well, I'm closing in on 50, so I hope so. I know you were talking about pages, but I'm turning 48 in January, so I'm mentally preparing for 50 already. I'm just getting used to the idea. So, okay. Why am I still a day behind on my pages? This page was unique. I think I would have been done and I would have been back on track, except the page I just finished had, and again, avoiding spoilers, a lot of alien dialogue, a ton of it. And normally in D versus M, you never see more than like a couple lines of entity speak, Now I have a little system in my head of like how to translate that, like, how to write their language, because it always does translate to something. It's never gibberish. And I think it's important to have a sort of a system, like a systematic way of doing their language. So the reader, even though they don't know what it says, can tell there's some method to the madness. Like, I don't want it just to seem like random symbols. I want people to be able to perceive that there's something being communicated here, even if they don't know what it is. To accomplish that, you do need some kind of you have to work out some kind of a basic approach to the language. In D versus M 1975 and D versus M 97, again, you never get more than a line or two from them. And it was easy enough for me just to sit there and kind of do it on the fly, because I had a basic sense in my head of like, this is how you approach it. This was the first time you see two aliens speaking to each other. Like, basically, it's a page of dialogue of these two aliens talking, and it was involved enough where I realized I finally had to sit down and formally work out, this is how the entity language works. This is, how to translate English to that. And, just so I have a system to approach. So whenever I have aliens talking, I write all the dialogue, just like I would for like a human character. But then I go and translate it. This time I had to make myself a key so I could go through and make sure I was doing it consistently and correctly the whole way through. That took time. I'm not going to show this to you because, but right on the other side of this page, I have the entity language cheat sheet. This will never be released. I will never explain to anyone how to do it, because while I do think it's important, the important readers don't need to know what the aliens are saying, and in fact, it is preferred that they don't know what they're saying. The aliens are supposed to be other. When you're reading this, you're supposed to be experiencing them talking the same way a human listening in would, which is, two things are talking, but you don't know what they're saying. I don't do captions. I don't do an asterisk and this translation, that doesn't make any sense. Like, D versus M is an eyewitness kind of written series of stories. It's what someone saw, what someone heard. As I said before, it's important that when you're looking at this, you can tell that there is something being communicated there. You can tell that there is some method to the madness, and that's enough. I want you to have the reaction of you're overhearing a conversation that you don't understand. And I can never imagine a reason I would want you to ever be able to go back and see precisely what was being said, translated. That's not, it's contrary to the storytelling I'm doing. So this is for me to expedite this situation, doing a page of alien dialogue. And it's going to come up again because I know this is also a little bit of a proof of concept, because D versus M 5 has a lot of alien dialogue, a ton. And not only the entities, which we're familiar with, from D versus M, the gray types, but maybe even some other species. I can't say any more, but so anyway, this is helping me get a sense of what will I need to do to prepare to do D versus M5 efficiently, because there's a lot of alien dialogue in that one. Anyway, that's what slowed me down. I literally had to take a few hours out of my drawing to come up with the alien language cheat sheet. So that puts me behind. But anyway, I'm always hopeful I'm going to catch back up, get that day back. In the grand scheme of things, is a day behind the end of the world? No, but it bothers me. Is it still, am I still doing a page a week? Yes. It's just somewhere in the past, it took me 8 days to do a page, or 9 days. And now I'm trying to catch back up and I just can't quite do it. It's a nagging annoyance. That's all it is. Okay, so I'm going to set up my page 39. As usual, I'm going to look at my completed pages to see if I have a panel layout that is identical, so I don't have to do it from scratch. Yes. Mystery is storytelling. Revealing, doing all your work, all your world building, all your research, all this stuff, and then just releasing that's fine for some kinds of stories. And that's maybe even a important part of the promotion of other stories, but not this one. Like there are things about D versus M that I've figured out, that I know, that I can answer, that there's no reason I would ever reveal that, because it would undermine what I'm trying to do with D versus M. Like, I just need to know, I need to be able to, make it all logical and make sense, even if it's not entirely clear what's going on to the reader. So, okay. Let's look at some finished pages. See if I don't think I have one with this format. This format's a little weird, but we'll see. One's close, but it's not. I think I'm gonna have to make a new one. Flipping page 27, 28, 29. I think I'm going to have to make it. Yep, I don't have one. Okay, so I'm going to find the closest equivalent, so I'm not totally doing this from scratch. I'm also trying to find one just because I'm a little lazy today. That isn't going to be a nightmare to open. Some of these pages are really dense. But I've been drawing a lot of dense pages, so I don't think that's an option either. So we'll just open this one, I guess. Palpate multitasking. Okay. We're going to start with page 15, which is in the ballpark. Save as page 39. Which feels like a lifetime ago. Page 15. All right. I always get scared when I save over finished page. Make sure, like, I did rename it, right? I did. You know, this is a new. I didn't screw up the old one, did I? There's nothing would completely screw me on this because sorry, I'm doing a finessey thing and talking at the same time. Because I have like Time Machine on my Mac. Like, even if I went in right now and just deleted every page, like, I could always roll it back. And I back everything up to like a Google Drive and a portable drive. Like, everything's spread around. So it's not, even if like the place burned down, D versus M would still be around. But nevertheless, there was always that moment of fear when you realize you screwed something up. What's your team, Paul? Cowboys. Wife has Lions and Packers on. She loves the Lions. G-Men and Bills. Have we confirmed? No, we haven't. I think we need to talk it over with Scott and probably Corey. Like, if Corey has an amusement park ride opinion, then I would say we should do it at Scott's. If he doesn't, rather than like leave anyone out, I would say let's just do it Wednesday. Philip, how are you doing, man? Let me check on Keith just to see. Am I late or are you starting in half an hour? Oh, did daylight savings just change? Oof. Workday. Okay. That's why there's a little bit of a, I just told, let's see here. I just updated Keith. Keith was like, are you early or am I late? Or I'm in Arizona. We don't do the daylight savings thing. So it switched and I didn't realize. Yes. Okay. The t-shirt. This is Crescent Ballroom. It's a venue here in Phoenix. It's my favorite venue. It's my favorite place to go and listen to music or see like a spoken word thing or whatever. They've got a cool little bar. And restaurant sounds bigger than it is. It's like, it's food. You're getting food served to you at a table. So I guess it is a restaurant. But it's very, it's like burritos and bowls. And it's very like, it's the kind of food you might expect at a place that's attached to a bar and a venue. But it's small. I don't know. I think I've always been this way, but I've just gotten more and more this way as I've gotten older. I like small venues. If yeah, I don't care how much I like the band or whoever. If it's in a giant arena, I don't care. I don't want to go. Yeah, isn't that some relic of like farm culture or something? Like, why do we do this? Michael Rappaport's hilarious. He's funny. Okay, so Keith will be on about 10 minutes. So start the countdown. Okay, where was I? Setting up my page. Almost there. I probably spent more time looking for an identical panel layout than it would take me just to make it, which is a good lesson for next time, I guess. That reminds me, what was the comedian's name? Oh, I want to find it real quick because I want to give credit. Brian Regan on Comedians and Cars Getting Coffee. He was telling a funny story about he worked at one of his first jobs was putting together bicycles at like a bike shop or a toy store or something like that. And one day, the guy he worked with, he was like, "Hey, you want to see how like we can like avoid working? Like I found a thing. I found a thing." He's like, "Sure." So they go into the back, and in the back room, there was like drywall that was like 3 feet away from the actual outer wall of the building, and there was a little hole in it that was behind some stuff. He's like, "Come on," and he like crawls into this hole. Brian Regan crawls in with him, and they're like shimmying back against tight against this brick wall and the drywall. And like the other guy looked at him and was like, "Isn't this great?" And Brian Regan was like, "I think I'd rather be working." Like this, that's kind of, me sitting like looking for a panel page that's exactly what I need for minutes. It's like, I think I probably could have just made that in the time. So it's going to happen. It's official. Detective Perez 3. That's exciting. All right. Before Keith shows up, I'm going to try and get all my reference stuff set up on my artboard. And then I will be ready to draw for later. So. Okay. It's funny. When I'm taking reference photos, I spend a ton of time picking like different variations, like a little bit like this, a little bit like this, like they're all a little different. So I have options when the time comes to draw. And then when the time comes to draw, because my idea is like, oh, you know, I don't know exactly what I'll need, so I want a lot to pick from. But then when it comes time to draw, like right now, I just arbitrary. I look at my pictures and say, like, I like that. It's totally like there's nothing rational to it. I'm just looking at a picture and saying, like, that's the one. I'm making an aesthetic, just, which in theory I could be doing at the time and not going through this. But anyway, I don't know if any of that makes sense, but. Where are my alien references? That's what I need. That's the one. That's what I want. My allergies, man. I don't know. It cooled off here finally, which is great. It's beautiful out. But something about that made my allergies just explode. I don't know what happened. Scratchy, itchy kind of throat. Stuffed up. Red eyes. It sucks. Okay. I think I see a Keith in the green room. So I'm going to save where I'm at. Keith, give me a thumbs up if you're ready. Okay, cool. How's it going, buddy?
It's good, man. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. Do I sound okay? Can you hear me? All that? Is it running?
You sound
okay.
You sound like the. I mean, it's the familiar dulcet tones of Gary Hodges that I'm using.
I appreciate that. All right, ladies and gentlemen, Keith Foster. Keith, of course, you need no introduction with me, but some people watching may not know who you are. So please introduce yourself to the audience.
Sure. I'm Keith Foster. I'm a comic writer, and I have been a comic writer for about the last decade. I think we're really close. It depends on how you mark time, right? Like we're 9.5 years since I think I released my first issue of Kodoja, which is one of the comics I do. It's a giant monster meets H.P. Lovecraft book. And but I mean, I've been writing it longer than that. We know how this works. You know, there's all these things that go into writing that are formulative, cloud gathering kind of stuff that you do before you actually put your first pencil or pen to paper. So anyway, I've been doing Kodoja. That's, again, the first book that I did. And then I had a second book come out earlier this year, which is Three Protectors. That's Kung Fu in Space. And I have a couple more books on the way. I have a horror book called Animals coming up. We'll get into all this stuff. But I'm also a managing partner at Invader Comics. And we are the phoenix that rose from the ashes of 215 Inc. Both 215 Inc. and Invader Comics are in the other publishers section in everyone's Diamond previews. So yeah, I mean, we used to be on about page 380, and now we're on about page 340 because alphabets.
Look at that.
Look,
Moving up.
Moving up. All we need to do is do that old gag where it's like a
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway,
there's got to be an Acme Comics, right? Somebody has done that.
Yeah. I mean, people definitely did that. If you look at the number of publishers and comic shops that start with A, it's pretty bonkers, or at least it used to be. It kind of ebbs and flows. And I wonder if it's that way about all businesses. Like, it does make me wonder if like 30% of all businesses start their name with an A, just to
be. Well, and I wonder if that will still be the case going forward, because in the old days, when you and I were young and vibrant, it was all about the phone book. It was all about being early in the phone book, and I don't know if does that matter anymore.
Yeah, I mean, what the hell is a phone book, right?
Do they even have phone books? Yeah,
I dig one out when I want to like stretch my lower lumbar or whatever on the floor.
Right,
about it.
Right. I do when I want to just show people how I can tear one in half. That's sometimes I mean, a party trick, just a thing to
back stretching and occasional strength displays.
That's right. That's right. Sometimes you got to alpha everybody in the room, Keith. Sometimes you got to just show them,
No, that's awesome. That's one other thing too. I am one half of the comics process podcast called Making Comics, and
that's right. Yes.
If you use a common podcasting service, then you're going to be able to find Making Comics on there. It's got a nice white background. It says Making Comics, and me and the homie Scott Lost are the guys that bring that to the ears of the internet once a week.
I'm a regular listener, of course, and I encourage everybody who's even sort of interested in the idea of making comics or just doing anything creative. I think it's worthwhile to listen to. I was just telling Ed I'm about halfway through the latest podcast with him. So
okay. Yeah. You're getting to the good part then. And I see Ed there too. He has the nickname for me of Numbers because I am.
What is the Numbers nickname?
I'm an analytics guy. Like when you like sports, spreadsheets, like all that crap. I've loved numbers forever. So hang around me long enough, and I'm probably going to figure out a way to put a bell curve and some numbers into the equation.
Well, so this isn't going to be a very formal interview, but I did have some things that I wanted to ask you about.
Man, you already interviewed me for episode 100. When does this end?
Well, I know. The thing is, you're just endlessly fascinated.
Oh, okay.
See? I mean, it's just like you can't touch bottom of that well. There's just too much.
Yeah.
No, that was more.
Creators are like onions. We have layers.
Yeah, absolutely. No, well, that was very much episode 100 of Making Comics. I put you and your co-host, the great Scott Lost, in the hot seat. But it was the questions were very oriented towards you guys as a pair and making comics. Now I have very Keith specific questions, but first, before we get to that, 215 from Philly, is that where 215 came from? Is that
Paul? 215 Inc. was formed. I mean, what a interesting story that whole name is, I guess. So I'll keep it short.
Yeah, no, go for it.
215 was started by a gentleman named Andrew, who is from Philadelphia. And so that was the origin of 215. Then he brought on some other people. And late in the game, I got involved in 215 because Kodoja, the first comic I wrote, ended up we tabled across from 215 Inc. at New York Comic Con once. They bought the book, and then they reached out to us later and said, we want to publish this. So just tabling at a show is what got us our first break. And then after that, things happened. It changed hands. I ended up, hitting it off pretty well with the people that were there. And through attrition and other stuff, I found myself one of the couple people that was running 215 about a year or two later. And then we, decided to kind of shut down 215 and turn it into Invader. So the weird thing about 215 Inc., at least in the final, one of the reasons that we changed it is because it's 215 Inc. And I am formerly of Philadelphia, but that's more of just a coincidence than anything. And so it's, Mike is from California. I'm living in California now. I've lived there for over a decade. So yeah, we felt like it was time to kind of, change it up and go in a little bit of a different direction and rebrand ourselves. But yeah, 215 is originally Philly. Nice catch.
Now, are you your LA area, or are you? Okay, yeah.
Yes, I am LA. I think there's a word called exurbs, not suburbs, but I'm LA like extended. Like.
Oh, okay. Like
LA? Yeah, if LA is the sun, then we're somewhere in the orbit of like Jupiter where I am. I'm out in it.
So okay.
I'm Corona. Yeah.
From where?
Corona, which is a good solid 50-minute drive from downtown LA with light traffic and 17 hours if
which direction away from LA is that?
We are what would that be? East. We are east from LA.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Okay. See, so it seems like actually now a few of the California people I know are kind of that east of LA. That I don't know, is that where everybody lives now? Does anyone live in LA anymore?
People live in LA, but real estate is expensive everywhere. And where we are, it's pretty crazy. It's just a ton of construction happening out here. Construction is just moving its way out. It's harder and harder to find something affordable. So people just go further and further out. And, it goes another, 30 or 40 minutes until the base of mountains, until basically they couldn't build anymore because mountains get in the way going that way. But I see Paul's comment. 215 comes before AAA.
There you go.
Not to Diamond Publishing, not to Diamond Distributors.
They viewed that as a T.
They viewed it as a T. So we were right after Tomorrow's Publishing in Diamond Previews. So yeah. But the weird thing was on the website we were first. So it was just like, okay, whatever. I know that was our potential big move. We could have been on like page 305.
So do you have a commute? Do you work actually there? And
I work somewhere around, again, with standard traffic, about 35 minutes away, which is like 12 miles.
But like in LA, by LA standards, that doesn't sound too bad. Like 30 minutes is not okay. So that's good.
It's good. It's good.
Yeah. I don't think I got spoiled with Phoenix, where I don't think I could live more than 15 or 30 minutes from work. I think I would just that job. If I saw a job listing for like Glendale or something, which if Phoenix is like pretty far, I would that would be the same as if I saw a job listing for San Diego.
But Glendale and Tanzania are roughly on the same wavelength, right?
Right. So, making comics, for the people who haven't listened to the podcast, it's basically, I would say it's framed as, you do it in the opening, making comics from two different perspectives. You've got basically writer guy and artist guy. You are writer guy.
I'm writer guy.
I, as people who watch my channel know, I'm kind of the one-stop shop. I'm doing the writing. I'm doing all the prep, and I'm doing the writing, and I'm doing the thumbnails. I'm doing all the inking, and I'm making a cover. I'm doing every step of it. None of it gets outsourced, unless you want to count sometimes having models sit in for reference. But otherwise, it's all me. Mm-hmm. Because that's always been the case with me, and because I've both drawn and written most of my life, I see all the commonalities between the writing process and the drawing process. And now I don't know if there's actual commonalities or just the way I approach it is the same because it's the same person doing it. Mm-hmm. But to me, an outline is a little bit like a gesture drawing, and a rough draft is a little bit like pencils, and editing is a little bit like, getting your real tight pencils in there. And then the last pass is kind of inks, I just sort of think of it that way. But again, this is the same person approaching two different tasks. Mm-hmm. I was curious, now that I have you here, you've worked with artists. You spend, a couple hours a week talking to an artist. Mm-hmm. Do you see a difference between writers and artists? At least even if it's just what you think individually, you see a different, you're different from the artists you've met. Do you see a different way of approaching? Is there any distinction you see there? Is there any kind of hot take you want to take that writers are like this and artists are like this? Do you think there's a subtle thing, or do you think it is all basically like the same animal?
Right. Simply put, all writers are alcoholics. No.
There you go.
No.
Hemingway-esque.
Yeah. No, the way that okay, so I can only describe it in the way that I think about it.
Sure.
And I think it's not so much artist versus writer on two ends of a continuum, right? It's more that there is a execution end of the continuum, and there is a, let's just call it, again, I think I referenced it, maybe like a cloud gathering, a thinking. Not that artists don't think, but it's execution versus strategy. Let's just make this up on the fly.
Okay.
And so I think the difference there is that for that combination to work with two separate people, I mean, even you with, artist Gary and writer Gary, right? You need strategy, and you need that up front. And then you need, you start with strategy, and then you work your way toward pure execution. So it's really about, to me, where on the continuum you are. In my case, I'm obviously going to be on the strategy and some degree of execution part of the continuum. And then there's a handoff to artists. And like any, it's almost like a baton relay across the continuum. And the working with different artists means that there are different places along that continuum where I hand off the baton. There have been artists, for example, way toward the execution end of the continuum, where I'm writing it all. I am calling all the shots. I am, again, writing a very detailed script with panels, and they are executing that vision. It's fun. That's fun in its own way because I have a lot of control, but you miss out on the dynamic. You miss out on someone taking your idea and putting their own spin on it. Yes, you can tell them, draw a penguin with a chainsaw in a room, and 10 different artists are going to draw 10 different penguins with 10 different chainsaws in 10 different rooms, probably. But there's still that, you're still telling them it's a medium shot of a penguin in a room with a chainsaw.
Yeah, you're giving them some kind of, you're not just saying like, reinterpret this however you see fit. Like you're trying to,
Exactly.
Right.
So with to use Rory Smith as an example, someone who did most of the first 10 issues of Kodoja, by the time our relationship had matured, I mean, the script would literally say, these two monsters are fighting here. Here's the dialogue here's all the dialogue you have to fit in over these 5 pages. Do what you want. Right. And then that would be it, because what he wants to do is a fair amount of strategy in terms of seeing the panels. And then,
and clearly you have a lot of trust in him
totally.
To execute this in a way that you think is appropriate or befitting or elevating of whatever you wrote.
Yeah.
So you must be, how long did it take you, or did you have any frustrations at first with the difference between how an artist is visualizing what you wrote and the picture you had in your head? Were you always pretty accepting of like, there's going to be a difference and I'm excited to see the difference? Or was there a learning curve where you were like, that's not what I pictured, and I'm less than delighted? I mean, you seem very easy about it, but is it just that you found the right artist?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I am very easy about it. The first closer example is pretty much what it is. The only time I've ever been disappointed by an artist has been when they have just missed something. We're talking about a blatant level miss, or when the work has been,
just not good.
The world sees my published work. They don't see my unpublished work, and the writing that's not good enough to be published, that's my little secret. The art hasn't been good enough to be published, I have basement tapes of that, because there have been artists where we've moved on, or it never even came to fruition because they're just not executing a basic strategy, so I'm not precious about my ideas or my stuff. I mean, I like to think that comes from the years and years I was in a band, before comics.
Yeah.
In fact, the bridge, if people are into that sort of thing, the bridge between music and comics, like Kodoja is really crossing it, and smashing it. But there's a clean link from the end of making music that goes right to the beginning of Kodoja, and that's because Kodoja was birthed out of a soundtrack that a record label didn't want, that was in that type of vein. But being in a band just gave me the, if I want my buddy, became my buddy, right? If I want him to play bass, then I want him to play bass his way. If I want somebody to play drums, then I want them to play drums their way. That's the point, to have everybody sort of be fulfilled as their creative, So
and celebrate whatever that cumulative result is, which you can't exactly predict. And I'm embarrassed I hadn't put that together, but I would think your time in a band would absolutely teach you the value of collaboration with other talented people, but also people who are talented in different ways than yourself. And like appreciating that, like, this team will result in something, and it may not be what I pictured, but that's fine.
Yeah, absolutely. It's again, I mean, every time when I have gotten pages back, I'm always like, this isn't how I pictured it, but I like it more.
Yeah.
Then there's the, Keith's, it's like the chart of acceptance for me ends with me cackling borderline maniacally. Like when I get a good panel and I'm like, that's my utmost highest compliment.
So when you're writing, how visual is the picture in your head? Like, I mean, I'm again, and I can't tell, I only know my own experience. As someone who's always written and drawn, like D versus M is very clear in my head. Like 95% of the time. Once in a while, I'm saying, like, I don't exactly know what this is going to look like yet. We'll get back to that. But usually, like, I have a very clear picture. And I've said before, it's sometimes I sort of picture D versus M like a movie. And I'm kind of writing a script to a movie and translating the movie to the comic version.
Yeah.
There's a weird loop that I'm doing, but it's very visual. What is it like for you?
Well, it sounds like you have a much more, what's the word? Like tight vision of what you're doing, where I sort of get it's broader brushes. I mean, we'll probably talk about this in a little bit, but I just finished a novel, and that's so different, because you need to paint that picture, even if like I'm not I don't want to overtell, I don't want to over detail. There are plenty of authors out there who over detail, and their names rhyme with, one of them is names rhymes with Schmeven Schming, right? Like you can get 10 pages of just description, and look, there are times when I'm in the mood for that, and there are times when I'm not.
And then on the other end of the spectrum, there's sometimes none.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it's fun. I retired it immediately because of the reason I'm about to explain. I had toyed with, I knew that, this was years ago, I knew that fan art can sort of get you social media exposure. Oh, okay. But I also am not a fan art guy. So I was kind of stuck, and I was like, well, how can I make this interesting to me? Is there like a middle path? And the middle path was like, maybe I could illustrate literary characters, like draw Frankenstein's monster, draw Count Dracula, and because we're all very familiar with the movie versions of these characters, which is very different from how they're described in the books, it's like, maybe that would be fun for me. But then when I tried to build my list of like, well, which characters would I do? You'd find that a lot of the famous characters that you'd think of that people would be interested in a drawn rendition of, like, there's minimal or no physical description. Like, they're just letting you just imagine whatever you want to imagine about them. So I was stuck. But
no, that all makes sense.
So so you've just finished. Tell us about, before I ask you questions about this, tell us about the novel it's not 100% done, my understanding, right? There's still but it's mostly done. It's like the worst is over, right?
No, it is 100% done. It is done.
Oh, you're done? See, I'm a little behind because my updates come from the podcast. Oh. And that's always lagged. So I think the last was like, I think in the last one I was hearing an update. It's basically done. You wrote the last page. You had your victory drink.
Yeah.
But now there's like a lot of, there's like little like last effort things that have to happen. So yeah. Okay, so now it's completely done.
The victory drink was done as in done. I refuse to look at this anymore. So,
nice.
Yeah, I mean, I finished that on October 24th.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I had my celebratory scotch that I drank. And of course, I did a one-day writer retreat in one of my favorite places, Lake Arrowhead.
Yes.
And then by the 26th, I had already queried the first 10 agents for it. So, I mean, it's great. I've had people come up to me and say, when do I get to read your novel? And the answer is, I don't know.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying the agent route first.
Right.
And after the agent route, so the agent route is going to take a minimum of 3 months because you can't, you can query multiple agents at a time, but you don't want to query a billion of them. So my mentor gave me the idea of 10, just do 10, see where it goes. So
you like batches, sort of. Yeah.
So it's 10. And then basically when you lose one, you tack one on. But I'm okay waiting a little bit. I actually got almost a form letter rejection. I got my first rejection, which is always nice.
Hey,
but it was like, I looked back on my own notes of it. And it was like, why the hell did I submit to this person anyway? They don't even represent horror. Like it was just like a basic bonehead decision. And I'm not sure what past version of myself thought that was a good idea. But
I mean, you just cast a white. You never know. You might as well. It doesn't cost you anything really to just just go for it. And I mean, I'm sure I myself have never submitted anything, so I've never myself received a rejection letter. But my understanding is that it's a long tradition. Every published writer has a vast collection of rejection letters of the books that ultimately got published. So, it's like, you can't, it's like, okay. I mean, I think, it's cause for celebration, your first rejection letter.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, again, I wish I knew the exact number because I'm going to be off by a few, but the example I always give people is that I think the number is 42, the 42nd record label that the Beatles walked in, signed them.
Wow.
42, 41. And if it's not 42, trust me, it's like 38,
absolutely.
It's a big number.
Well, the one who you obliquely referenced before, Stephen King, talks a lot about just the piles and piles of rejection letters.
Exactly. Yeah. So I mean, it's a multi-tier strategy, right? It's going to be the big swing for the agents first. And then after that, it would be smaller publishers with me just going directly to them. And if that doesn't work as a last resort, I will probably self-publish it. And I've already, at my wife's recommendation, I haven't strategized too much about that because you want to plan for success.
Yes.
I have an idea or two of what I can do there. And again, if that happens, then it happens. You know what I mean? I can't control the market. Horror, believe it or not, is not super hot at the book selling level right now.
Really? So it's what is the thing now? I don't even, I don't follow that anymore. If you were, which no one should ever do, but if you were trying to chase the trend, what is the book you would want to write right now? Is it still like young adult fiction, or what
Absolutely. is? Yep, YA would definitely be the big horse to chase there. I mean, dude, I barely know how to write a novel for adults, much less an added.
Right. I wouldn't even
hire people who can pull off YA. You've got 30, 40-year-old people pulling off YA like it's no thing, and it's like, I don't know. I mean,
I don't even know. Like, what is the meaningful difference? Is it really just like, is this PG-13 or R? Like, what is the, because when you read Harry Potter or something, especially the later books, it doesn't read like something for babies. Like it's just not like, there's not a bunch of big sex scenes and like gory deaths. Like that's the only real, I don't know.
I just finished Harry Potter book 6 4 days ago, something like that. I went to Scotland a couple months ago, and that rekindled my interest in Harry Potter because it's, so much of Harry Potter's world is loosely based on the city of Edinburgh. Right. And it's been fun. And to your point, like I decided that I wanted to reread books 3, 6, and 7 because I feel those are my favorites by far. And so I did 3, and like 3 was fine, and it's a good time, you know. That was like 2 months ago. But then I did 6, and I'm like, this is quite good. And and to make are you ready for my bold statement?
Go for it.
Yeah. So this is one of those. This is a hot take. Okay.
Okay.
I am prepared right now to say that in terms of character development. And maybe this isn't a hot take. Maybe you're going to be like, this isn't a hot take at all. In terms of character development and bad guys, I actually think Harry Potter surpasses Star Wars.
Whoa.
I mean, base stuff, right? I'm not talking about the Mandalorian. Like what Star Wars has the advantage of is that other people have come in and given the world's breadth, right?
Yes.
With Harry Potter, we only have one person's vision right now. So, but if you compare that one person's vision to
with like Lucas's,
the 6 films that basically Lucas did, and then the stuff under him. Yeah, I mean, I actually think Harry Potter is a pretty amazing protagonist, and I think Voldemort is damn near the perfect villain. You know, so I mean, it's again, J.K. Rowling's not a perfect writer. None of us are, right?
Yeah.
But when you talk about world building, the world building is pretty world class.
You know, I'm trying to decide how I react to this hot take.
See,
you know, I don't think you're crazy. I think here's the thing about Lucas and Star Wars. I think, and by the way, I'm on record, even though I can be very critical of it, I'm a Star Wars guy. And of all the like geek properties out there, Marvel, Star Trek, Star Wars, Harry Potter, like all the stuff, Game of Thrones, whatever, like Star Wars is my thing. Okay. Even though it's a love-hate sometimes. But Lucas can't write human characters behaving like real human beings. Like, I mean, and I think that shouldn't even be a controversial take.
Yeah, without Lawrence Kasdan coming in there and pinch hitting for him.
Yes. Yeah, he needs an assist. But on his own in a room, he doesn't know what normal human beings talk like or sound. Or that's pejorative. Let me reel that back. I'm not saying that. He's not trying to do that. I think he's trying to be very broad, and it's like a fairy tale for him. And fairy tale, like Jack and the Beanstalk, you don't know who that person is. You know, like he's just, you know, and it doesn't matter. You know, It doesn't matter who Perseus is. It doesn't matter. Like he's doing the heroic thing. I think that's how Lucas approaches writing Star Wars characters. Like these people don't behave like real human beings. And then when you see like the world building, a lot of that is something he passed off to his art people. You know, he's going to them and say like, I don't know, I think maybe, you know, a gas planet. And then like they go and build it all out. And that's where like you get a sense of world building. Like he had like one kernel of an idea that he passed off. He's typing into the AI art generator, like, lava planet. And then like, you know, and then someone's doing it. So like, yeah, so I would say like, no, J.K. Rowling, like I think she's far better at writing flesh and blood people and building out like how this world works. Yeah. You know, I think that's fair. I think that's okay. Let's see. We've got, first of all, before I go on to my next question, Ed wanted to point out the difference between writers and artists. Writers and artists. Did I say rightists?
I mean,
writers and artists.
Gary, you just coined your term about yourself.
I'm a rightist.
You're a rightist.
An arter.
Yeah.
Artists are the pretty ones. Okay. Writers and directors.
That's obvious. Yeah.
There we go. Yeah. Writers are directors. Artists are cinematographers. Let's see here. Drink for Star Wars references.
Yeah.
There will be some Star Wars talk today.
Yeah. And
because even though I love both the Making Comics guys, one of them has superior Star Wars taste. It's this one right here. This one right here.
This guy. By the way,
I love you.
Ed with
Scott, you're my buddy. You're my bro. I love you, man. But when it comes to Star Wars,
yes,
this guy just kind of knows a little bit more what's up. That's all I'm saying. That's all.
The critical thing being we agree on Last Jedi, right?
Yeah, exactly. I don't even know what all the other data points are, but it's like, how do you feel about The Last Jedi? You like it? Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
He is.
Can I ask you a question? I wanted to ask
Sure,
you a question
absolutely.
along. I've been jotting down a few things on this back of junk mail envelope that I have.
And Ed, I completely agree with George Lucas. Okay, go ahead.
Totally. Okay, so since you are a rightist,
Yes.
When it comes to your favorite creators, comic creators, are they all-in-one guys, a la Frank Miller? Are they writers? Are they artists? Or is it just a mishmash of all of them?
I'm inventorying in my head.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a bias towards the rightists. What I do admire, and this is me giving something back to George Lucas a little bit because he would fall in this category. I do admire people who will take a big swing with a singular vision, like, and try to do like everything themselves. And George Lucas, I mean, obviously he's still bringing in people, but like, for example, writing the prequels, I didn't love the prequels. Like, I thought they needed work, and I thought they would have benefited from collaboration. And yet, good on him for saying, like, I'm going to do it all myself this time. Yeah. You know, like, I respect that. I think it was not as good. The art wasn't as good. The result wasn't as good. But I think everyone, you know, if you're a billionaire and you own this property and now you can kind of do whatever you want with it, it's like, why not? Why not just do it all? You know, like, just take your shot. Yeah. So I admire it. But when I think about my favorite comics of all time, they were collaborations. So it's not, it's not, my admiration of it isn't enough to overrule, you know, other things. Like, my all-time favorite book is League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, Volume 2. Like, that's just, I mean, that's always been my go-to. Like, to me, that's like just my most enjoyable comic experience is probably reading that book. And that's obviously collaboration. So, you know, but it's also heavily more. Like, I mean, it's like, there's no getting away from, you know, it's like, it has, even though like he's not drawing it, it drips of him. So I don't know.
Well, in terms of big swings, have we talked about Christopher Nolan much? Are you a Christopher Nolan fan?
I do like him. And yeah, he's another one that's interesting. I don't think he's on the same level. He doesn't have the same weaknesses of George Lucas, of course. Mm-hmm. But there are things, every time I watch a Nolan movie, I love and respect it's like a Nolan movie. Like, you feel it. But that's all, like, for good or ill. You know, there are sometimes, like, I still haven't seen Tenet, so I can't say. But like, when I rewatch the Batman movies, I wish he could bring in a fight choreographer. You know, like, so it's just like a thing where it's like, yeah, you know, I respect that he's doing his thing. He has a vision and he's executing his vision, and I like that. I like to see that. I like to see work that feels individual, that feels like there's a creator. Even if it's a collaboration, there's at least one vision here being amplified above all others. But then, yeah, sometimes there's a hazard in that if you're not particularly good at all things.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like my track. So the good news about Tenet is that if you haven't seen it, then the average time that today's session has seen it is 6 times, because I've seen it a dozen. Wow. I can't get enough of it, but I'm still not sure it makes sense.
Right. Yeah.
It's awesome for that. You know, it's kind of a glorious mess, but when you think about what an enormous swing for the fences it was, it's so much fun, you know.
Yeah, and I'm eager. I just haven't, like, I need to see it in the next couple of weeks. But like,
I mean, yeah,
I think it's tough because, like, one thing I would have zero interest in seeing, like absolute zero, would be a painting done by 2 people. like where they collaborated on painting. Like to me, like I want to see, like, and I say this all the time when I'm talking to, especially when I'm talking about indie comics. Usually it's in the context of, I don't want to see your spin on Batman. I want to see you come up with something that's completely unique. And I don't even care about the execution. You don't have to be the best artist. You don't have to be the best writer. I just want to see something where I read it and say, like, this is absolutely the vision of an individual. And I feel like I'm seeing the artist through the, like I'm getting a sense of what this person's trying to do. This person is expressing something. And like that has to be individual. That's what I'm looking for. Obviously, that doesn't work with movies because it's a massive, undertaking. Like there's no way, you can't really have, unless you're doing a weird little student film, some roadkill rotting on the side of the road, time lapse. Like, I don't know, like there's no real film you're going to do that's like just you.
Yeah.
Where you made all the choices, you made all the decisions. You're the only person in frame, if anyone's in frame. You're the only one doing the music. I get it. So that's why I guess I admire where if somehow in that mess of collaboration, you still are able to find people to sign on to your vision and try to help, help communicate whatever your idea was. I think the least interesting movies in the world to me are the ones that anyone could have directed this. Mm-hmm. Anyone could have been performing in that role. It wouldn't have mattered.
Yeah.
I like to see, like, even if it's an interesting failure, I want to see something interesting.
Yeah, I mean that's that bumps up against a line that I say to creators at shows when they come up and talk at the table or anything. I'll say it to the Starbucks guy if I need to. But Ed just put in the chat, right? Originality is exciting, and so for me, I think by when I say I love Christopher Nolan, when I say I love The Last Jedi, what I'm saying is I value new ideas. I place a great weight on new ideas. And mediocre, I would much rather see a novel idea, an interesting idea executed poorly, to your point, than I would a mediocre milquetoast kind of idea executed well. And that's when it comes to music, it's that way. There's a certain genre of music right now that everyone in my family loves except me. And the reasons I don't like it is because I've heard it all. It doesn't do anything for me. I would much rather hear something interesting that's different, that excites me, even if the production sucks. Again, it's mediocre, and if you're going to be mediocre, you might as well be bad. There's too much good stuff out there, right? To be mediocre. Absolutely,
yeah. Well, and also, and this will be a small gimme to the The Last Jedi crowd. I think when I'm very public. The Last Jedi is my second favorite Star Wars movie of all time, like right behind Empire, which is a lot higher than, I wouldn't say most, I don't know, but a lot of people would not rank it that high. A lot of people, it's maybe near the bottom, but that's. And I think sometimes when I've had that conversation with people, their first response is like, so you loved the Casino Planet? Like you love, like they want, and it's like, and I think that's where like the wires are getting crossed, where it's like, I don't think they're getting that the reason I love it is because it was fresh and it was a different take. And it was like, let's start moving Star Wars into a different direction. Maybe you don't like the direction it's trying to move it, but it's like, let's not just remake one of the old. And that's what was frustrating for me as a fan of The Last Jedi, where Force Awakens came out, which I loved. I thought it was great in a comfort food, nostalgic, classic Star Wars sort of way. It's like, all right, yeah, this is very familiar. And a lot of criticism was, they just remade A New Hope, and it's like, okay. Then The Last Jedi comes out, which is not a remake of any Star Wars movie. Like it stands alone in Star Wars movies. People are like, it's not Star Wars. And it's like, I can imagine working at Disney or Lucasfilm and saying like, you don't know what you want, and between those two options, I liked Force Awakens, but if it's, do you want a familiar, comforting, warm, snuggly piece of media in this franchise? Or do you want to like stretch it? Do you want me to challenge you a little bit? Do you want me to like, maybe sometimes art should polarize you a little bit. Maybe sometimes it should make you go like, what? You know, like maybe that's actually part, maybe we've gotten a little soft and a little fragile where it's like, no, I want to just be delighted the entire time in this movie. Like maybe we forgot 70s movies, you know, like American cinema. Maybe we forgot that sometimes art is supposed to confront you a little bit and make you wonder what is a hero and why would Luke act that way and why am I mad about it? You know, like maybe that's good. Maybe that's showing that it accomplished what it was trying to do. But that's
I have two thoughts on that, right? The first one is that for me, reconciling Force Awakens and Last Jedi is much easier. I do not like Force Awakens. I am that person. I am basically like, I don't need a bad cover band of New Hope. I have New Hope.
There we go. Right? Okay. Which I understand. I understand. And just a quick interjection. I think the main reason I liked Force Awakens, other than the familiarity and the nostalgia, it was the first Disney Star Wars. I wanted to see, especially after the prequels, the dark times, in Star Wars parlance, like, can you even make a familiar Star Wars, like something that feels like Star Wars? Like, is that even possible with George Lucas not in the mix? And to me, like, Force Awakens was proof of concept. It was like, okay, all right, this could work out. Like that, I think that was some of my like, but continue.
Yeah. No, but I think what to me, the thoughts that are circling in my head right now tie to this larger thing, which I think is the core of what we're talking about with Star Wars and what you just said. It's the pull between nostalgia and something new, you know, and it's okay. So I just came back from Vegas like an hour ago. I had a super quick turnaround. I was up late, and I am going to pay for it. I'm probably going to nap right after we record this. But you know, I always like examples that sort of illustrate the thing. And we went to this very cool place in Vegas called the Golden Tiki. It is an awesome tiki lounge in the middle of an unassuming strip mall in Vegas. Which is, by the way, almost everything in Vegas that's not on the strip is like, it's just a strip mall. And then you go inside, you're like, my God, this is amazing. You know? Yeah. So full on tiki place. And there was a band playing there last night. The band's name is the New Wave. They're very cool. And afterwards, the guitarist for the New Wave sat down and was just like chopping it up with us for a second. I think, you know, so he had a wireless guitar. So he would like walk around and like play as you're sitting there drinking and like just, it was really fun.
It sounds very Vegas, but
yeah, it was great. It was great. But they were this cool band and they played nothing but 80s new wave songs as surf rock. So they would play, and I'm talking, you know, there were a couple Cure songs in there. There was a New Order song, a surf rock version of Blue Monday. I didn't think that existed in the universe, but it turns out it does, you know. But the guy was talking to us, and you know, we wanted to know, you know, like, do you do parties? Do you do whatever? You know, how far do you travel? Would you go to Southern California? Because, you know, one of our friends has this idea of maybe bringing him down for something. And he was like, "Oh yeah, man, we'll do anything. We're whores," right? But what he said, which was interesting to me to this point, is he was like, "We played our originals for a couple years and nobody gave a shit, and then we started playing these 80s songs and now we get gigs, you know." And again, I think so much of that illustrates what we are talking about with this. Of, you know, like I go crazy with nostalgia. It feels like the depths. I made a joke 15 years ago when comics, maybe 10 years ago, I don't know, when comics properties were blowing up and we were getting more and more obscure. I'm like, oh boy, get ready for the ROM Space Knight movie, you know? Yeah. It got laughs. A year later, it got optioned, you know? And it's like, wait a minute, what the hell is going on? You know, and the depths of nostalgia just continue to get plumbed. And it's like, don't we want new things too? Can't we? Where are the new things going to come from? We can't just have an infinite loop of nostalgia forever. Yeah. No, I'm very curious what's the end here? Like, where are we going with this? Like, and I mean, are we going to get into a period 15, 20 years from now where we're remaking the remakes?
Like, what's happening? Like, where, like, and I get, like, this is, you know, lots of words have been written on this, but you have these massive undertaking. You're spending hundreds of millions of dollars making a movie. You want a sure bet, because if it doesn't land, like, you've really torpedoed yourself, which makes them all play it very safe, i.e. cowards.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, like, there's no room anymore, arguably, to say, like, I only need $25 million to make a little thing that's different. You know, it's like, well, even if this blows up, what does it make? 200, 300 million? Like, that will barely fund the big movie we have to do next. Right. You know, so it's like, and I hoped streaming would somehow open that up, where it's like, oh, okay, well, now the barrier of entry, like, you know, you just throw it on Netflix or something. Let's throw some $15 million movies on Netflix. I remember, this is only, you'll see the connection. I don't know if it's totally related, but you'll get it. David Lynch, who I respect a lot. David Lynch is a fascinating creator, and talk about someone where every time you watch his thing, it drips of a singular vision. Like, that guy knows how to get his idea across without it getting lost or, you know, muddied up by everything going on around him and all the people he needs to help tell the story. He put a short on Netflix, or Netflix put a short of his on. I don't remember the name of it, but it was him playing a detective interrogating a monkey that had dubbed. Did you see this thing?
No, but you can keep going. I'm very.
Does somebody? I want to get the name. Hold on, I'm Googling right now. David Lynch monkey interrogation.
Like, I mean, that makes me happy to live in this time in history that you can escape that into a web engine. That's
the thing. Oh, there's a Wikipedia entry. What did Jack do? That's the name of it. 17 minutes long, black and white. David Lynch he's got this monkey in jail. He's interrogating it. They did like an overlay with his mouth, or it's CG. I don't even remember, but like it's speaking in English. Mm-hmm. It's this totally good luck trying to even figure out exactly what this monkey is being accused of. Something involving a chicken. I don't know. Okay. Anyway, I'm watching this thing. I find it, to be frank, and I love David Lynch, almost unwatchable. Like a lot of great and unusual and unique and interesting art can be, where it's sort of like, I can't say this is good. I admire it, but I this is not good. You know, this is like really difficult to watch, and maybe I'm not the right person. I actually kind of had this reaction to Eyes Wide Shut. I sat through all of Eyes Wide Shut, and I was like, maybe that's good. Like, I don't know. I don't know. I can't, I don't know if I'm getting what I just saw. I don't know if I care. Maybe I am getting it, and I just don't care. Right. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't think I'm the audience member for this. I can tell it's very well done. That's sort of what I would say about this David Lynch short. It's crafted. Mm-hmm. It's a singular vision. It's interesting. It's also like incomprehensible David Lynch, like just fucking around, and which is a lot of his content. Now, the point is, as I was getting like into this 17-minute short, like the first 5 minutes was sort of bemused curiosity. The second 5 minutes was kind of just flat, like me just watching this crazy thing. And then the last 7 was actually indignance and outrage. And it was, in this brave new world with Netflix, with streaming, if we're going to feature weird student film shorts, why doesn't Netflix set up a thing saying like, college film students, submit your shorts. We're going to have a thing once a year. We're going to post the 10 best, the 10 that we like the most. And we're going to feature it for our massive Netflix audience and actually do some good with this thing. Instead of this, what I see as a fucking vanity project,
right?
With David Lynch talking to a monkey for 17 minutes. It's like, he doesn't need this.
Right.
Like, and if this is the level of art you're going to elevate and throw on the suggested watching thing, why not find some interesting, fresh, new, and do you see maybe how I got there with what we're talking about?
I do. There's an interesting parallel to Stephen King, right? Like you just mentioned, like that is news to me what you said earlier, that Stephen King got a ton of rejections. I mean, I know I have enough Stephen King books, and I've dabbled in a lot of his autobiographical things. But you know, Stephen King can think of anything right now, and it happens.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
and
yeah,
look,
he's out of the rejection letter.
and I happen to like, you know, I haven't read a lot of his more recent late stage stuff, but every book I've picked up that he's released in the last 10 years is pretty solid. You know, like he's still got most of his fastball, you know, which is neat to see. But yeah, I'm there with you. You know, it's you have all these people who, now that they have a world of opportunity, they'll put out anything, and sometimes they're crapping out anything, and that's like you said, it's not so much, it's more about the opportunity cost than it is anything else. It's the opportunity cost of that real estate on Netflix that could have been put in the hands. I mean, like you said, like that would be a fascinating thing to do.
I would totally be down to watch that. And let me tell you something. I would be way more tolerant of just incomprehensible weirdness if I knew it was coming from some experimental student. Like someone just trying to figure out, like, what am I doing with this film medium?
Yeah.
You know, like that I want to see. I don't want to see like a 60 or 70-year-old man just like, I got a crazy idea, you know, and like, who's made a bunch of movies, you know, like he's out there, he's arrived. Like, I'm not taking away from him, but you wouldn't even have to pay these kids. They would die for the exposure. And I usually am very anti, like, don't do anything for exposure. But if you already have this short film in the can and you're not a professional and you just submitted it to your college film fair, whatever you were doing, like, yeah, whatever, like send to Netflix, drop it in your shared folder and whatever, like that would be amazing. Why don't we have that? That was what I hoped streaming would be. And instead it's, you know, it's not.
That's so much, you know, that's similar to one of my things about social media, right? Like I thought social media was supposed to democratize everything, and all it's done is just give big money another megaphone. You know, and like big money doesn't need any more megaphones, and now it has it all because money always moves in, right? And that's the tricky thing about anything that has some degree of democratization to it. It's going to have that until it doesn't, and
it just recreates whatever the problem was that you were running away from. Which, I mean, I don't know, maybe that's the human experience, but so let's talk about your novel.
Sure.
First of all, do you want to did you say the title before? I think you did. I haven't. You haven't? Oh, okay. Are you is that still?
I'm not saying it yet.
Fair enough. Okay.
There'll be a day.
What do you want to say about it? Are you comfortable sharing about it?
Oh,
you said horror. You said it's horror.
Okay. It's a Lovecraftian horror novel.
Yes.
That is it's a slow burn. It's going to be different than anything anybody's read from me before. I obviously think, you know, I mean, this is what you want as a creator. What you want as a creator is for everything you do to be the thing that is your best work of all time. Then next issue or book, you want that to be your best work of all time. You want to keep on elevating. So yeah, I mean, I think it's my best work of all time. I'm very proud of it. And yeah, it's a slow burn horror film, a horror novel. It's not a film. The books that I can tell the books, I can mention the books that I'm giving it to agents in terms of my queries. And so there are elements, and again, these aren't super commonplace, but maybe they are. I don't know. More for the book nerds out there, I guess. But Dan Simmons' The Terror. It reminds me a lot of that. That was a show, I think, on AMC.
Yes.
It's more about the environment. My environment is incredibly cold for this novel.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So it's got that. There's a fantastic book by an author named Lois Murphy called Soon. and I very much recommend it. It is a slow drip horror thing, and most of the book is quiet, and it only has like 2 periods where the horror pays off, but holy shit, does it pay off in some like really great, terrifying stuff. So Soon by Lois Murphy is a bit of a scary novel. The original inspiration for the book, even though it's nothing like it anymore, was American Gods by Neil Gaiman. That was really the book that made me want to write this book.
Okay.
But it has very little to do with that, you know. But there's another. So I would kind of give that as a back burner thing. But there's also a book. It's called The Fisherman, and it's by an author named John Langan, and that is another slow burn Lovecraftian-esque kind of horror book that I would say, and maybe one more like obscure one. There's a book, again, more stylistically than anything, and this one actually the horror, you know, kind of jumps out and bites you a little bit more than in mine. But it's a book called The Croning by Laird Barron. That's another book that that sort of is in that space. So anyway, slow burn Lovecraftian stuff. The people that have read it, you know, it builds to a climax, and I have heard a lot of very good things about what Act 3 is in this book. You know, it gets there. But you know, again, what people have told me is that the Act 3 is a really delightful payoff.
I'm very excited to read it myself. I'm intrigued and excited. So
yeah.
So now this is your first attempt at writing a novel, correct?
Yes.
And you spent how many years?
Almost 5.
5 years, yeah. So this has been a part of your life for a while.
Yeah.
I shared a little quote with you the other day from John Steinbeck, where I'm not going to try and paraphrase it, but the gist of it was like the sadness of being done with this thing that you've been living with for so long. Are you experiencing that at all, or was that like incomprehensible?
No, I'm not. I'm not.
Yeah.
I think that quote's super interesting. Again, I think the gist of the quote is basically you're not letting go of your novel. You're placing your novel in a part of the world where other people get to have a dialogue with it now, right?
Yeah.
Which is really neat. I think that's a neat way of putting it. So for me, no, I think there's 2 reasons. I think number one is the relief I feel in finishing the novel is great, and I feel like it's the thing. It's better than the thing that I thought it was going to be. You know, I mean, I think you can relate to this, right? Like, in fact, this is one of the things I wanted to talk about with you. This idea of having a massive project. Gary, D versus M is a massive project. You're not even halfway through it.
I know.
You know? And you know, again, you talk about how like you should have chosen the novel probably because instead of writing a novel, you've chosen to draw and write a novel,
illustrate a novel. And that was so that was something for people who don't listen to Making Comics. I think it was it the 100th? I think it must have been the 100th episode.
Probably.
Somehow it came up like how I decided to start doing D versus M.
Yeah.
And I was looking at 3 types of things spread in front of me that were like either I had an idea or there was some level of done or whatever. And I had some screenplay ideas that were outlined and, you know, there was a little bit of work, but there was the idea of doing D versus M. And there was this fantasy novel that I was trying to write basically back in college and for a few years after college. And that I finally just set aside. I got at this stage, if I circle back, I'd probably have to start over because it's been too long out of it. But I had like the first act written. I had about 200 pages or something of this thing.
Wow. Okay.
And what I was looking for was something that I could finish reasonably, like in not a ridiculous amount of time, you know, like I could get it done, but also that if I was happy with it in the end and if I saw fit, I could actually get out there. So that's why I was like, well, no screenplay, because best case scenario, someone will buy that and throw it in not best case, but most likely success scenario is someone will buy it and throw it in some file somewhere and it'll never, no one will ever see that movie.
Yeah, you count your cash and no one ever hears from it.
Exactly, which is the most likely successful. If you're a successful screenwriter, that's the most likely outcome, is you're selling scripts that never get made. You know, like, so it's like, well, I don't want to do that. And then I looked at, so it's novel or comic. And I've been a little uncomfortable with this ever since, because it's like I didn't phrase that the way I wanted. I sort of like, well, I'll do a comic because it will be easier. than a novel. And in retrospect, now looking back, I felt like, no, a comic is way harder. Now, that's where I want to like qualify my language. I know writing a novel is not easy, like, and I've attempted and failed. So like, I'm aware. What I should have said is like time investment. Like in terms of time, I felt like a comic would be easier, that I could do a comic faster than I could write a novel. And now that I've been doing a comic, I realized like, no, I could have been done with a novel by now. And as you pointed out, I'm only halfway through my 6 comic series, which, because as you guys pointed out, I think on the podcast with Ed, I'm basically illustrating a novel. Like I have, you know, like I wrote a whole like anthology book and now I'm illustrating it, which is way harder than if I had just written it. So it's, but you've spent, well, you've been in this just a little bit longer than I've been doing D versus M.
You mean the novel itself, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I heard something, and I think it's
no, that's fine.
Talking, and I'm like, someone's not in my house. That can't be right. But you know, you never know. And hey, they may join us on the live stream.
You never know. Well, we'll see we'll see your mugging live.
Yeah, that would be great. That'd be exciting. Probably better than talking to a monkey in jail.
It's way better. Experience. You have to. I'm assuming it's still on Netflix. You should seek it out. It's got to be somewhere on the internet. Just
sure.
David Lynch monkey. You'll find it. But
yeah, boom. So I think it's about the value. You talked about this, I think, on our podcast on some episode. It's the value of small movements. You know, this is. Look, I didn't think I'd finish this. You know, I didn't know 5 years ago that I'd actually have a novel that I'm proud of that ended up being better than anything I could have written. In fact, I just happened to pull out this idea on a podcast that we have taped, but I think airs maybe Monday or the week after. This wasn't even the idea I had for the novel. I had a different idea, very different idea. And then I guess I must have gotten into it. I'm like, nope, I don't want to do that anymore. I want to do this thing as my first novel. And that's what the horror story sort of became. But it's all about that. You know, I did it in 5 years by either writing 500 words a day or creating 500 words a day out of nothing, or editing for an hour. That's it. You know, a minimum of an hour. Sometimes I would want to edit 3 or 4. Sometimes I would edit the hour and be like, sometimes I'd click on my timer at 52 minutes, 56 minutes, 58 minutes, and then it hits the hour. I'm like, I am out of here today. You know? Yeah. Just, and that's how it goes, you know. But yeah, so it's just the value of small movements. So that's
it is. I find something I think a lot about when I'm doing this. It feels like an erosion process. It's like geologic time. It's just just trusting that these little gestures over time will result in the Grand Canyon. Like, but it's like, but you can't set out, if you're a river, thinking like, we're going to make the Grand Canyon. You just have to say like, today I'm going to do this again. Just do this again, you know, and eventually you're going to step back and realize like, oh, I'm done.
Yeah.
That's it. There is something kind of magical about it and fun about that, but also at sometimes psychologically very difficult. Because you like to maintain that mindset of like, I can't be thinking about the whole. I need to be like just looking at the ground in front of me, like where I'm trying to go today, and like just keep doing that. It's one thing I was really curious about was being your first novel. This is the first time you knew there wasn't going to be an artist visualizing something. Was that liberating? Was that more challenging because now you had to fill in all those gaps with the writing, or like what? Maybe both. Like how was that?
I mean, I think to answer out of your two choices, liberating of the two you said is the one that's stronger, but it ended up being liberating. What it started at was I was tired of paying artists. That was it. I was just like, I like telling stories how can I tell stories without paying artists? Because again, I pay artists for everything I write right now.
Yeah.
And it's fine. It becomes more of a profit loss exercise, but just the refreshing ability to do what you and what Scott do with drawing, it's just your time. It's just your time, and for me, I've kind of institutionalized this idea of my time creatively every day, and I'm happy about that. I want to try to bake in even more creative time wherever I can. So this is how I want to spend my free time. So that's why I like it. And it's free. It costs $0 and only my time. And of course, we all know, to quote Scott, you can always make more money and you can never make more time. But given the precious nature of time, this is how I like to spend it. And I like to explore stuff, that which kind of gets into the second reason why it was easy to put that novel in a drawer and move on, which is I'm already into the second one. This is November 6th. As we're doing this, I am using the novel November idea for me to challenge myself to write 1,000 words a day every day in novel number 2. So it's very different. It is going to be a much bigger creative challenge than the first novel, but why am I doing this if I'm not challenging myself creatively?
Now, maybe this is just confessing my own neuroticism, but is there any anxiety over the idea of I'm going to take I'm not going to write for a little while. Like now that you've done this for years, writing, anytime, the idea of not doing it, to me, I find this very often, especially not so much when I'm writing scripts, but when I've been drawing a comic for a year or something. Those few weeks after it, it's like coming up from the bottom of the ocean and the bend's hitting you. It's weird to be I'm not doing this crazy time consuming task almost every day. And it doesn't feel right. I have to start, I need to watch some movies or read a book or something because I'm not used to just being able to sit here and not have anything going on.
That's a perfect way of putting it.
Okay.
For me, the way it worked is that it lasted 24 hours. 24 hours. I finished the book. I took that photo that's on my Instagram of the glass, the Scotch glass with the bottle next to it with lovely Lake Arrowhead behind it. And then I just celebrated. I walked down to the tavern there. I had a burger and a beer.
Nice.
And just kind of walked around the lake a little bit. I'm like, I did it. I knew I'd feel like this, but this is a great feeling. It's a great feeling to know that I did it. I drove back down, didn't have anything to do for the rest of the night because I've clearly done my work for the day. And then next day around, 1 o'clock, it was, I started to get a little stir crazy and I'm like, fuck it, just start the
next one. Just start the next thing. Yeah.
Start the next one. Yeah. I mean, the nice thing too is that I don't think I'm going to commit to this 1,000 words a day. It's creating its own problems today. Today is the first day where I've had problems with this, and we can get into that if we want, but it's been nice for that. But even at 1,000 words a day, it's still less work than I was doing in the final month of the novel because I was effectively doing double work every single day. I was doing all kinds of things because once I set that date, Scott has talked about this, I think, on our podcast for sure, and maybe even on this show. We're in the business of arbitrary deadlines. Yeah. You set deadlines for yourself
because nobody's going to make you finish.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember Scott's exact line. It's you're your own boss.
Yeah.
Do you want to be that boss that always gives the worker slack? Or what would you like to do exactly? So. Yeah. For me, it's I'm a firm but fair boss. I set my goal and then if I make it. Again, today is the first part where I don't think I'm going to make my goal because I'm sort of forging. I don't know if this is interesting in terms of creating something brand new, right? Mm-hmm. And I'd be interested to see. I get the feeling this might not be the case with any of your D versus M's because I'm assuming you have an idea of what books 4, 5, and 6 are going to be.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. So
they're all at least outlined, and for some of them, there's chunks written. I have a very clear picture of what those last 3 are going to be. Yeah.
Okay. So but where I am is I am at a spot right now where like I am seriously driving with no headlights on this road.
Yeah.
And today is the day where I'm like, I mean, what I've been doing so far, and it's worked for the first 5 days of this novel November that I've been doing, is when I go to bed, I ask myself, what are you writing tomorrow? Do you have any idea? Just get an idea of the scene, get something, and go from there. For the first 5 days, it's worked. Yesterday, when I finished my writing, I made a couple notes of like, okay, what else can I do from here? And I wrote down 2 scenes that I would be interested in writing.
Yeah.
Problem is, both of these scenes require me to do a fair amount of research on what I want to do, you know? And as a result, look, I could write them today, but they're going to be really crappy stand-in versions of the scene that's going to be there. And it makes me wonder, like, you know, what'd you give? The first draft is pencils / thumbnails.
Yeah.
It absolutely is. And it's like, this wouldn't even be pencils. This is like crappy thumbnails with stand-ins for everything. So I feel like I might just need to take a little bit of a break and do a little bit more big thinking, because I'd rather, you know, what's the old Abe Lincoln line? Well, the first one is, you know, never trust anything you read on the internet. Abe Lincoln said that.
Right.
The other one is, I think it's give me an hour to chop down a tree and I'll spend the first 50 sharpening the axe. And so that's where I am right now. Like, I can hack away at a tree with a dull axe, but I feel like it makes more sense to just take a day or 2 off, figure out what I'm going to do, and then attack a scene with actual ideas of what the hell I'm going to do.
Right, exactly. Well, and I think you've probably had the same experience doing your research or whatever you need to do, your background, whatever you need to prep before you start writing. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes will reveal an interesting idea where you're like, oh, I didn't know that's how that works, or, oh, that's interesting. And that can help come up, you know, so you could do your pencil sketch of like, I think it'll be like this, but then you realize like, well, actually I got to throw that all out because now I have a better idea because I've done my homework.
And again, perfect. That's a perfect way of putting it. And it just brings up the idea of what we just said about arbitrary stuff. This is like, am I writing 1,000 words a day because I want to check an exercise? Or am I writing 1,000 words a day because I want to have the first draft of a novel that makes sense? So,
well, that's where it's good.
You know, novel over exercise, that I can feel good about myself writing 1,000 words that I hate. And
that's why it's good, especially if you're doing an indie anything, comic, you're writing a novel, you're anything where you have to be self-motivated.
Mm-hmm.
It's good to have, as Scott says, like a tough boss. Internal boss. I usually do it as like you need to parent yourself a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be a little bit of an internal parent where you're like, hey buddy, what are you doing? Just sitting there? Could be working, you know, like, I mean, just, but also like a rational boss where if you go to them and say like, you know what, I don't think I'm going to draw today because I got to figure out my alien language, you know, like they go there. You don't want some dipshit boss who's like, no, it's drawing day. Like, you need a rational boss who's like, yeah, that makes sense. I'm going to give you time to you get 4 hours to do your alien language. And then you have to come back and draw. Like, someone who actually is interested in delivering a result, not just, as you say, checking a box. Like, did you draw today? Good. That's all that matters. No, exactly. Not all that matters.
Work is work. Yeah, exactly. Work is work.
Yeah.
Hey, did you want to talk about the alien language? Because I find that kind of stuff fascinating.
A little bit. Yeah, sure. If you want. Yeah, absolutely.
I created a little bit of a language for my novel. And somewhere I write in journals and take notes and stuff when I can. I used to do it a lot more than now, but I still do it. So every class note I have is kind of in this shelf, but on the bottom in some novels. And somewhere in one of those, journals, in one of those journals is the code to my alien language that I can bust out whenever, or my language that I can bust out. You have the alien language. So, I mean, what process went into that for you in terms of creating language for
well, so this one is simpler. Okay, so to do a little bit of preamble. So with the novel I had been working on, which is a fantasy novel, I was coming up with a language for that too. That was way more involved because I felt like it had to be. This was like a serious novel, and it couldn't be as something as rudimentary as this is. But in that case, what I did, so in college, for my language, I took Latin. Okay, I'm that guy. I took Latin instead of something practical like Spanish or French or whatever. Actually, Latin is a great language to take. It really helps you with word meanings.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the words we encounter, not all, but most have some kind of a Latin origin. Even if you've never heard the word before, you don't know what it means. Sometimes you can look at it and guess, like, what probably has something to do with this. So, like, it also helps me here in Arizona with Spanish, because Spanish is a Romance language. Romance languages all kind of came out of Latin. So sometimes I can look at Spanish, even though I only took like a year or two of Spanish. I can look at Spanish and kind of figure out like, well, that probably is talking about whatever, just because there's enough there to see it. But anyway, also really helps with Italian for obvious reasons. But anyway, I had a fantasy language in the novel. The way I was approaching it, I have a giant English to Sanskrit dictionary, but I'd come up with the words, so I would look at whatever I was trying to say. I'd come up with the Sanskrit words, and then I would Latinize them. And that was my scrub process. So because I knew how to make a Latin sentence, I would take just the Sanskrit words, and then make it correct in Latin and zip it. And that's why it was incomprehensible to anyone, but it seems like a real language, and it seems like it has a logic to it.
Mm-hmm.
I was not going to be that ambitious with the alien language in D versus M. The alien language in D versus M is basically what you would call a substitution cipher, where, to quote Jake Gyllenhaal in the movie Zodiac, which is one of the greatest movies of all time.
Okay.
Oh, so I love it so much. I don't know, for me, I don't know, but it's really good. And David Fincher, one of my favorite directors of all time. It's just really good. But
we share a lot of tastes, so I'm making a note for it.
You should check it out. It's good. It's long. It's a commitment. I think it's 2.5, maybe even 3 hours, but it's very good. But in that, the Zodiac was this serial killer who was sending ciphers to the papers. They were trying to crack it. And when they finally did, they realized it was just a simple substitution code and he's explaining it to someone else in the movie. It's just like we made as Boy Scouts. A is 1, B is 2. It's like you just need to get a sense of and the way you crack it is you say, well, what are the most common letters? Mm-hmm. It's your Wheel of Fortune letters, R, S, T, L, N, E, and what are the most common double letters, LL? And you start looking for well, if LL is the most common double letter consonant, do we see any repeated symbols of this cipher that we could guess is LL? And with the Zodiac code, they figured out, what do we know he's going to say in these letters? Kill. Mm-hmm. So if we see a double cipher that's probably LL, and we see the same two in front of it, we know that's the K, that's the I, and now you're off to the races. You can start to go from there. And that's basically how the alien language works. But because I don't want anyone cracking it, I put it through a few more washes. So people can't do what I just described. They can't look for these obvious. So I have things like double letters actually have their own symbol, and contractions have their own symbol, and I do little things just to break it up enough where it's hard. But the point of all this was, and I talked about it a little bit before you came on, that I explained this to you in our message last night, because I showed you the page of the alien writing. I want it to look like there's a logic. I want you to look at it and say, there's just enough structure to this to know it's saying something. He's got line breaks in deliberate areas. He's got punctuation. There's different he's doing things here. And it just looks, you can tell that it's looking at Chinese or Japanese or something. You maybe don't know what it is, but you can tell something. There's information there. You're looking at or something. But I need it camouflaged enough where you'll never translate it, because that's the point. The point is you're overhearing aliens talking. You're not going to know what it means. That's why I'm not translating it for you. You're not supposed to know what it means. You're just supposed to know that you hear alien language. And that's why I'm going through this I had to take time to like work this out. So when people are looking at it, they can tell something is being said here. And what could it be?
Yeah.
Like, oh, I would love to know, what are they talking about? Like, I feel like this might be important, and it is important, guys. And it actually reveals a lot of the story, but you'll never know. Like, you'll never know, because that's the point. The point
that's fun. You know, like, I mean, that's the kind of thing I think you and I both think is fun. You basically had the opportunity to do a Charlie Brown wah 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 wah. You could have just done that. You could have just crapped out,
nonsense
characters, but you chose not to. You know, I was actually, shameless plug, but it's kind of not a shameless plug.
There you go.
This is the Kickstarter cover of Three Protectors, but it made me think of something. And for people that have Three Protectors, I know Ed's in the chat. If you go to these title pages, I'm going to try to show it here. See how there are these filters up here?
Yes.
Those are actually full sentences that I translated into a font you can get on the internet.
There you go.
You know, same thing, right? I can appreciate it because I did it. There's an opportunity where I could have just put gibberish in here, but it's not gibberish, and that kind of stuff as a writer is a real blast.
And one of my, like I mentioned, one of my favorite comic of all time, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, Volume 2, it opens with John Carter on Mars. And it's, if I remember right, maybe 3 to 4 pages of full untranslated Martian dialogue. And I loved it. And like there's with panels and like aliens talking to each other and like it's in full like extensive dialogue. You have no idea what's being talked about. You just know that something's being talked about.
Yeah.
And I guess in a way this is a little, it's not really, it's partly my homage, but partly like I saw that years ago and thought, well, that's proof of concept right there. Like you can do this and it's fun. I think it's fun. I like it. I like that he refuses to translate this for anybody, that you'll never know like exactly what's being said. You can look at the characters and you can intuit, and that's what I want. It's like, I want that. I think that's appropriate, especially for the story I'm telling, is to not know, what.
Yeah. No, I mean, that makes sense too, because when you're writing and I think for art, this can apply too. But all I think about is in the writing concept, like writing, all meaning is assumed to be intended.
Yeah.
So you'd better have intent in everything you do, because if you don't have intent, it will get assigned, and that's a tricky thing. I mean, you don't need intent over a bottle of grape soda, right? But you need intent over the things that matter, because again, if you're not putting intent in it, then it's going to get interpreted as intent. And I think as an artist, you can relate to that too. Your lines better have intent. The things you're drawing better have intent. If they don't, people are going to assign that intent. Well,
and I've always felt like it gets worse if you're doing like sort of a conspiracy comic like I am. I think part of this is by design, and part of it's just, I think, the nature of that genre. You're inviting scrutiny. You're inviting people to look like, are there hidden hints and messages, and so it turns you into a little bit of an obsessive compulsive with your details, because you're like, I know someone, like, for example, in D vs. M 1975, you see 2 license plates, 2 different cars, 2 license plates. And I just felt like, if I do this right, someone's going to be looking like, what does that mean? Like, how did he pick, and so therefore I need to come up with something. So for both like the 2 license plates, like I came up with like some logic of like, there's like a secret little, a wink or something in there. Yeah. Another thing with this one I'm working on right now, I had to arbitrarily pick a time. You see, it's 1979. There's clocks everywhere. We didn't have cell phones. So there's wall clocks and people wear watches and all that. I had to come up with like, what time is this happening? And you'll be in a room where there's a giant clock on the wall. You got to pick a time. You could arbitrarily pick it, but someone's going to wonder if there's some significance in the time that this is taking place. And it's like, well, I guess there could be. So you sit and you come up with like, this is why it's this time. And will anyone ever ask I don't know, probably not, but at least you know why you picked that. And at least, and what's a little sad, I do that anytime I have to make a call, about anything. What's the phone number that's being said? What's the time on the wall? What's like, I come up with some justification. But a lot of them I'm doing on the fly, and I bet I've forgotten half of them. Like, I know there was a reason I picked that, or I went with that, or I decided, but now I don't know. There was some, there's.
Hey, I'll have something to talk about when my book sees the light of day. That's a fun thing to talk about for sure. But I wrote down while you were talking that I think that's what's cool about all that stuff that you're doing. D versus M is a mystery in a lot of ways. It's a mystery. And the key to having a good mystery is to give more information than what the reader needs, right? So the value of false clues and things that get interpreted as clues is
dead ends.
You don't want to be ham-handed about their delivery. So this is why what you're doing is such a cool idea, right? This value of baking a ton of information in there that can reward the hardcore, but can also serve as a nice, what's going on here? A false clue, so you can fill people's head with information, which allows you to put the real clues in there if you're even making a solvable problem.
Yeah, or make it more apparent than you would think because you're looking at all these other things, and that's something you appreciate in great, like mystery writing, especially, or something like Knives Out, which I was bananas for. I just love, that's a move. That's one, I think, the most precisely written scripts I think I recall in recent memory was Knives Out. Where it's just, it's all there. It's all just, but you don't even know where to look, so you don't see it. One thing, it will be a little meta, and it will be a writing challenge to pull off, so it's not ham-fisted. But what I'm excited to do in the next one, D vs. M 2001, what I've talked about already is it's sort of like a special forces team. It's sort of like a Man in Black equivalent of a SEAL Team 6. It's like this little group of soldiers. And just like you would expect in the real world, and D vs. M always tries to use the real world as a touchstone. How would it actually work? How would it actually work? They don't fully know what's going on. They don't fully understand, what's the deal with the aliens? What are the aliens after? Why are the dinosaurs useful against aliens? Where did the dinosaurs come from? They're also a little bit in the dark. And so there's going to be a scene one night. They're out in the woods doing stuff that will be revealed years from now when I'm done with 2001. But they're sharing their stories around the campfire of what they think is going on. And it'll be sort of some of it will be drawn from what readers have told me, and how where they think, is it this? Is it this? It will be fun to have that little wink. They'll sort of represent, in a way, the audience, the general public when it comes to conspiracy theories, everything's sitting around trying to that doesn't make any sense though. Why would that be? And arguing about no, that's not what's going on. It's this, I'm kind of looking forward to writing that. Like I said, a little meta, a little hammy, a little winky, but I think will be very fun to read. It'll be fun to see these characters speculating on things that you're also speculating.
I think that's a blast. In fact, while I think that the fourth Matrix film is mostly forgettable, I think that the first 20 minutes, 25 minutes of it, when I watched it the first time, I was just like, oh, we're in for something. We could be in for something pretty great.
The
Wachowski sisters put in there, they have that. They have that fun focus group where they actually take real things that people have said about the Matrix itself and bake it into the movie and have people. I thought that was such a great,
it's fun. It's fun, and it's
sort of middle finger to some of it too.
Yeah. And the key in this, I have not decided yet, because I've only sketched out that scene and written little bits. The key is am I going to put the real thing in there as where you have, they're laying out, this is all the possible things, and one of them is actually onto it, or no, is it all going to be no, they don't got it. They're and I don't know yet. I'll see once I'm in it, I'll see what feels right and what plays right, and some of that will come into focus where I define these characters a little bit better and get a sense of what are they likely to think, as opposed to what are me just like injecting. I don't want to be injecting you like YouTube comments. You know, like it's like, of these characters I created, what is a plausible thing that they would suspect or think or speculate, or what are their experiences? What is their view of this? Like that's probably going to shape it, but I'm looking forward to it.
I think that's cool. Can I ask you one more question? I mean, I don't know. You probably want to wrap up soon, right? So
we'll probably, pretty soon. Yeah.
Okay. So I've had something come up in a couple of my comics, and what I was talking about with the second novel, to some extent, is this too. I've taken to challenging myself in a different way recently, and I'm wondering if you've done any of this kind of stuff in the past or plan on doing it in the future. I actually craft a scenario I have no idea how to get out of.
Yeah.
So I have a thing in it. It's actually begins in Kodoja Symphony of Madness. That's the 4th arc, number 2. And like, as of right now, I have not written number 3. And while I know how number 3 and 4 are going to go, I know how it ends. I know the big strokes, right? But it's these smaller things, the broad strokes. I'm not sure how these other things work. And so there is a legit scene where I have no goddamn idea how I'm going to get my character out of it. Yeah. And that's kind of what that's kind of the, in a way, that's a character thing. But in macro, in terms of the process itself, that's what I'm doing for my second novel. I'm writing, and then I'm just like, okay, what are you going to do now? Yeah. And putting that pressure on myself. And, you know, for the first 5 days of November, I think it's yielded nice results, because I exit the day knowing something about the novel I did not know before. And that's the point, right? Like this first draft, unlike my first draft for my first novel, it's very much writing as exploration and trying to be in the characters and have them just figure stuff out. Again, I know the broad direction of this novel, but I want the characters to sort of figure it out. And so it's putting a lot of pressure on myself. And I'm wondering, is that something you've done before too? You basically put your character up a tree with absolutely no idea how the hell you're going to get him down from it.
Absolutely. Well, or more often put myself up a tree and not sure like what I'm going to. So it's usually, and I don't know how you approach, but generally the way like a D versus M first percolates is there are some like basic beats. I think I want to start with this kind of character. This is where I want to end up. I think this will happen somewhere in the mid, like in the process. There'll be like a thing like this, or there'll be a thing like this. But now I got to flesh that all out and string together all those bits I had. You know, like I know I have A and I have F and I have Z. So now I got to come up with all the other letters in between. And I think, and this I think is a useful approach for any creative. I think it's at least worked for me, is an inherent, unwavering belief that there are a suite of solutions, but some are better than others. And like waiting for the better one, you know, like, and in my, I don't know how your ideas come to you, but at least for me, I can say that generally my first idea is not interesting. Like it's, and I've made this analogy before. It's something I first was talking about with Dan Ekus 1,000 years ago, but like when you go to, you see these old Roman roads in Europe where there's these grooves where like wagon wheels have rolled over them for thousands of years, like, you know, carved them out. And like, so now, like if you're running a wagon down these roads, like you're going to be in this, you're forced into this little like channel, this little slide almost.
Yeah.
To me, that's how creativity works. Like if I come to you and say like, tell me a story about a bank heist, tell me a story about a vigilante superhero right now, I'm pointing a gun to your head. Tell me one right now. The first thought you have is going to be very tropey. Yeah. It's going to be very cliche. It's going to be very familiar. It's going to be very like Campbellian hero's path, you know, like, because those are the grooves in our Roman roads of our brains, you know, like that's not like, that's how you tell the story. That's where it would naturally go, you know, like it just makes sense. I'm always inherently skeptical and suspicious of my first idea for that reason. I always, even if it's okay, it's like, all right, maybe. What else you got? You know, and then and that's where I'm putting myself up a tree. It's like, I want my second idea.
Yeah.
Like, or my third, you know, like, let's get deeper. What's one? And sometimes, like, I know 97, I was stuck at the script stage for a while. There's some minor 97 spoilers here if you haven't read it, but what did Jenny do with the negatives? And how is Cynthia going to get the negatives? Like, how, like, and I was stuck on that. I knew that had to be where this ends up going. Cynthia's in there for negatives. Jenny stowed them someplace. That's why they need them. They know, like, we've got this all under control, except this girl still has negatives squirreled away somewhere. We need those, you know? So, like, find out where they are, you know? And Cynthia's approach, again, spoilers, is like, I'm going to, like, pressure this girl and make her seem hopeless enough that she needs to prove to me what happened. And that's the only thing she's got. That's the, like, and that's how I'll find out. So that's how I'm going to approach this. But how do they get in the room? She's been under arrest. Cynthia doesn't have them. And I thought, and the solution I eventually came up with, I was very excited about. It's like, this is elegant. It has sort of a, like, it's a little winky where it's like Cynthia ends up bringing them in without even realizing. Like, it's like, I like this. I like this. This is great. But that was not always in the script. Like, I had a different idea because I was like, I don't know. And like every one of my solutions, they were solutions, but they just were not. Like, but I never gave up on that idea. And this is going back to, there is a perfect, and I'm not saying this was the perfect solution, the one I did, but there is somewhere out there a perfect, elegant solution that checks all the boxes, that's clean, that makes sense, that will be enjoyable for the reader. I just haven't come across it yet, you know? And that's also like your boss, your parent, like, is this really the best idea you have? And it, like, sends you back to the drawing board. Like, no, this could be better.
Exactly.
Yeah. Like, this
makes sense.
Yeah. So that's usually how I tree myself.
Yeah. You know? No, I think I do something similar. It'll be, I think I have a pretty good filter before it gets written somewhere. Where, you know, and I think that's what you're talking about, right? It's like, well, that could do it, but I don't like that.
But that's not good enough. Or I've seen it before.
Or it's too obtuse. Or, you know, whatever. And it's like, okay, well, you know, if you think of something cliche, you're like, all right, well, how can I turn the cliche on its head? How can I flip the cliche a little bit and see if I can make that work to me? If that can't work, so yeah, you do keep on trying to do this creative problem.
Get outside the Roman road grooves, like where, you know, like there's something, I know there's a fresher, there's more individual take on this. There's something that's there that I just it hasn't popped up yet, but trusting it's there, trusting this isn't some weird unsolvable math problem from the 1500s. Like, there's some idea out there. I just need to be open to it and keep like, you know, as like I know there's a perfect candidate for this job. I'm just going to keep saying, no, not this one, until that one walks through the door, you know, and just being a little patient with it, which is frustrating sometimes, but just knowing, like, it's not there yet. It's not it. That's not it.
That makes sense, man.
So I had one last question for you. This is partly because you've just finished your novel, and partly because someday, when I'm done with Divra Sem, I intend to pick up the novel that I've set aside. I'm curious, what is something now at the end of this that you wish you had known when you started the novel? What would have made your life easier? What was like an aha moment that came somewhere in the process, later in the process, that you're like, God damn it, my life would have been a lot easier if I had known that from the start?
Okay. I'm going to meander just a touch. Okay?
Go for it.
So for me, the thing with the first novel that I would have liked to change, and that I am in fact changing, you know, because something I've been talking about it a lot, actually, that everything you create is actually part of a dialogue with previous things you created. So, you know, the way I am writing this second novel is a dialogue with the way I wrote the first novel. And with the first novel, I had a great idea of plot. I liked the plot. I liked a lot of elements in the novel. I could see some scenes. I loved the setting. The setting was actually what came first. All this stuff. Characters were underdeveloped.
Mhm.
So my answer is that I would have worked more on character and had the novel feel more like an extension of the character's desires instead of a puppeteer making sure all the puppets fit his plot.
Yeah.
But I think there's a larger thing there. It's not just work on character, right? It goes to this idea of my mentor has this triangle in terms of writing novels, and there's three basic skills in writing a novel. There's plot, there's character, and there's voice. Plot is what you think it is, character is what you think it is, and voice is one of those weird things that nobody can really describe, but everything everybody
Isn't
can
sort of like the tone and approach, like how you're telling the story?
It's how the easiest description is probably it's how you write your sentences. It's the sense of humor. It's the way the sentences flow.
Because it's not journalism. You're not like recounting facts of what happened in your story. You're sitting around the fire with an audience telling the story. How are you telling it?
Exactly. So the line that he gave is that nearly everybody on the planet, we can't speak to universes yet, can we? Well, you might be able to because of D versus N, but we everybody on the planet is good at one of those things naturally. You just are. There are rare souls who are actually good at two of them. No one's good at all three. Right. Everybody has a glaring weakness of those one of those three. So what I would say is, applying it back to your question, when it comes to writing a novel, the thing that I would have gone back to is working on your weakness more up front. Because if you don't work on it up front, it's going to be even more glaring by the time you get around to it. And you're going to be like, oh my God, I got to rewrite so much of this novel. If you suck at plot, it's going to get found out. So you might as well hunker down. And instead of being more character and more voicey, you think more about the plot. Again, in my case, character has always been my weakest thing. And it's always the thing that takes the most work. And I should have known that because I'd done it already with Kodoja. The finished version of Kodoja has much stronger characters than previous drafts that I had done.
So by implication, so what would you say your strength in that triad is?
I think my strength is plot. I'm pleased with my plot. Hopefully by the time people get to the end of Kodoja, they'll see there was a plot at work there.
Sure.
I like to think that my novel will reveal itself to have a pretty nifty plot. Three Protectors, I don't know, man. Three Protectors, that's a different story because it's
a different kind of story. Yeah,
I also had a very plot-heavy version of Three Protectors that essentially got scrapped. And so for people out there that might be interested, I don't think I put this on my web store yet, but the finished version of Three Protectors just plays like a cornball kung fu movie to some extent. It's a little smarter than that, but it's a Shaw Brothers homage. Very Shaw Brothers-y, right? I'm not here to explain too much of that crap. It's because, that's good enough.
Just because, right.
But I had some really fun plot elements that were my typical convoluted stuff, and it got into some real, to me, interesting moral questions that I wanted to do. And I ended up taking a lot of that and putting it in an ash can. It was basically the cut pages from the first draft, and we put them together with some explanations so people can take a look at them. I always have it with me at shows until I sell out, and I'll put it on the web store, but again, it was more convoluted than that. And, sometimes the plot can get a little too Byzantine, right? I don't want that. But in general, I think plot is the thing I'm strongest at. From what I'm told, people like my voice. Voice is one of those dumb things that's invisible to you, but other people respond to it. So I've been told that my voice is fine. That's good enough for me. Character for me has always been the weak thing.
That's, there's a line, something you said if your plotting isn't working, that will be revealed. But I would think any of those three will be revealed as you go on. If something's not, and it reminded me, just to go full circle, you were talking about the terror. I have a few books on these ill-fated polar expeditions. I've always found that fascinating. I don't know why. It's so interesting, but and I wish I could remember. I think it was one of the Shackletons, and it might even be a quote from him, but I don't remember for sure. But one of them, it opened in the intros talking about how, almost none of these were very successful. There was always like just tough. And he had written somewhere about these expeditions. If you are in any way false, this ship will find you out. Like, and there's something I thought of that when you're talking about the novel, like, but the idea being like, if you don't do well under pressure, if you don't play well with others, if you get lazy, if you're a malcontent, if you're, a coward, if you're weak, if whatever your thing is, going through this, we're going to find out. Like this, it's going to bring it to the surface. And I thought of that when you're talking about like you writing the novel. Like if in any way your kung fu isn't righteous on one of these three things, like it's going to become apparent. Like as we go farther and farther down this path. Like
absolutely. I mean, that I am writing that quote down because I like it so much.
I think about it all the time. If you're in any way false, the ship will find you out. Because you can use it for anything. It's life. Yeah, like if you're in it, like life's going to figure it out. Like we're all going to become aware. Yeah,
exactly. And again, to the point of the novel, the further you go without addressing this thing, the more glaring the problem is, because what you are doing is actually widening the chasm by making the stuff you're good at better.
Yeah.
And not addressing the stuff you're worse at. So it's just going like this. And that's what happened. Like the kind of notes I got early on and, even midway through the process before I really worked on it, even with a read I got, I refer to this famous No Vaseline read that I was given.
That's right. Yeah.
Early last year where the guy had, some of his things I was like, no, this book clearly isn't for you. But there were some where it was like, he was right, but boy, was he blunt about it. He even talked about the lead. He's like, I don't care about this character. I don't care about your lead character. So that prompted me to really put a lot of work in the lead character. And that's what happened. So I made that chasm just too goddamn big by working on the stuff I was comfortable with, so great voice, fun setting. The plot's neat. Nobody gave a shit about the characters. So again, that's what my advice would be to anybody out there writing prose, especially in novel form, where you're really going to have to, take some time is
your elements, the purest base elements right before you. Well, and an analogy that I used a lot when I was 97 was of the three that I've fully written so far, 97 was the most difficult for me. And an analogy I was using at the time when I was struggling with the script and making changes and in a mini version of what you just described, anytime you make a change, you now have to go back and kind of make sure it all like makes sense. I said it's like trying to fire a rocket at the moon where like you're playing with the angle, and you fire it off and then you realize 4 days from now, nope, it's just going into deep space. It's not it's not okay. Now this time, like just a little bit. Yeah. And then like, let's run it again. Let's see. Or like another, like a simpler analogy, like doing your little Hot Wheels tracks with the loop. Like you're sticking them all together and you see like the cars going off at this one place. Yeah. Oh, I didn't snap that together right. That's what it's like. Yeah. It's you're kind of, but every little change. And sometimes sadly you won't know till that gap becomes very end, and you're like, that didn't work. That didn't get me where I wanted to be.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to co-op something that people have talked about a lot with novels. I mean, my final novel ended up being almost exactly 70,000 words, maybe just a couple hundred over, something like that. And I guarantee that I threw away at least 90,000 words to get to that 70,000 and probably more. It's true. I probably threw away on the order of 100. I probably threw away 2x the novel in words.
Yeah.
Get to the novel I am at. And again, it could have been even more than that. And authors say that all the time, right?
Oh, well, and especially I suspect we're the same. Like your first draft is always twice as long as anything. Like any final thing, like you just, like I'm just going to fill in everything I'm thinking. And then it's later where you go back and you say, I don't need that. Yep. And like I said in 200 words here, something I could have said in 18, and like, I mean, that's where you start, and killing your darling.
That's even where I am with 1,000 words a day. Like what? Guess what I found, Gary? When I write 1,000 words a day, my scenes tend to be either 500 or 1,000 words because it's much easier to just write a scene today or write 2 scenes today than it is 645 words of one scene, and then you start the second one, and it's like formative thinking. It's much easier to just over explain or over describe, and it's
Sure.
like, man, I might as well just highlight those to delete in
Yeah.
But it's fine. It's part of the process too, because you're going to learn a lot from those words you delete, even if you don't use them.
You are. Well, and then that's the craft. And to me, that's the biggest indicator of, and I'm trying to be kind here because I don't mean it in a mean way. Like an inexperienced writer, a young writer, something like that, it's like this. I'm reading, and I still am not even really sure like what the point is of this paragraph. Like why is this here? It's the craft is taking that chunk, which is your first draft, and that's fine. First drafts are garbage, and like everyone's better off if they just make peace with that. Because I found a lot of people who are like, oh, I just hate my writing. It's like, because you're reading your first draft. Yeah. You should hate it. Like you're just getting it all out, just getting it out. But like the craft is figuring out how to take this much. And like, again, the voice aspect. How do I hit all my thing, like all the points I need to make, but make it aesthetically nice, like that's the job, that's the art, I think. It's like totally. Making it enjoyable to read and get the information. It's not just straight stream of consciousness in your ear, like and then we've all had that painful experience, especially in an artist alley, where you ask someone about their book and they start describing it beat for beat to you, and then the main character goes to, and like, and it's like,
like you need to read it now.
Yeah, right. You're just like, I don't exactly, but it's like no.
Right. Yeah.
All right. Well, I do need to get going. I'm supposed to go and get some food, but
yeah, man,
I really appreciate you coming by. I had a great time talking to you. Please plug away. I have your link in the description, but any place you want to point people, any of that.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me, dude. You know what I mean? Like this is pretty much the kind of conversations we have. It's just it's a joy to record it and chill on a weekend afternoon here. And so yes, thank you so much for having me. I do appreciate it, man. It's great.
Anytime you want to come back too, if there's ever like a weekend where you're like, I've got nothing going on, what are you doing?
Oh, hey man, I just might take you up on it. So yeah, I'll even take a look because again, this was so much fun. I'd love to come back. In terms of me, I mean, KeithRFoster.com. I think that's the thing I want to mention. If I've said anything that might interest you and you're interested in picking up a book, then by all means do that. They're there, they're waiting for you. And I guess the other thing would be, hey, let's say you don't want to spend money. Let's say you think that I'm saying something interesting and you don't want to spend money. There's a free podcast right there. Making Comics. We are past 100 episodes right now. That is easily 100 hours of listening and probably far more.
probably 200.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, man. I mean, Scott and I do the podcast. We have fun. Again, it's helped. You are basically kind of like I don't even know. You're like our special guest star. You definitely have the highest episode count of non.
I do. I'm the Don Rickles.
I think Ed's catching on you. I think Ed might be on 3, but I think you've been on 4, maybe something like that. But anyway, so yeah, that's my 2 things to mention.
Great. Yeah, then I think everybody should check out. I'm a big fan of Kodoja. Lots of people are. I think Scott Cirkland is still like talking about like, I got to get him on Artcasters. I got to get him on this other show because like he's come by and he's bought Kodoja and he's familiar with you from the con scene. Oh, for Three Protectors is also great. Like you said, if you like Shaw Brothers stuff, Kung Fu stuff, it's kind of like, forgive the shorthand, you have about like space Mortal Kombat sort of like kind of like something like that. It's a lot of fun. And I am very interested in whenever it is, whether it's months or years from now, getting my hands on the first novel.
Thank you, man. No, I appreciate it. Again, hey, stay tuned. I'm waiting for agents to get back to me, and it's gonna come out. It's gonna come out, at the earliest,
one way or another,
mid next year. At the earliest, mid 2024. If it comes out later than that, it's coming out because a publisher got it and needed to slot it in well in the future. So
great.
I'm excited to share it, and it's just a matter of working hard to see what the best way I can share it is.
Perfect. All right. Okay. Well, Have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, man. You too. And again, thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Yeah. Everyone else, I will maybe see you next weekend. Like I said, like the schedule's a little weird, but have a good week. Get your creative stuff done. And hopefully next time we're talking, I will be starting page 40 of D vs. M 1979.
Nice.
Crazy.
Man.
It's a pile. It's a pile. Yeah. As they always are. But
yeah,
all right.
Exactly. All right.
Bye,
take care.
everybody.